Welcome back to the Poker Vlog. This is episode number 239. For this one, we're playing the WPT World Championship event. It's a $10,400 buy-in, the biggest WPT event that's ever taken place, and I have my best result that I've ever had. So I have a combination of my footage and WPT feature table footage that I played on for 3 separate days. In this episode, we play against Stephen Chidwick and the 2003 WSOP main event winner, Chris Moneymaker. So awesome to be playing with him and to be able to share it with you. I just want to give a big thanks to everybody who's joined the Facebook page. I have a link down below in the description box, but it's been a cool way for me to get to know you guys, see some of your hand histories, and interact with you on a more personal level, and then also Facebook stalk you. All right, let's go ahead and get started. The time is finally here for the event I've been waiting all year for. It's the WPT World Championship at Wynn Las Vegas. The prize pool is $15 million guaranteed, the largest live guarantee in the history of poker. It's a $10,400 buy-in, and I'm ready for it. I focused on tournaments more in 2022 than any year previously. I had quite a bit of success cashing in large buy-in events while playing against the best in the world. I kept knocking on the door of getting six-figure scores and getting my name on the Mike Sexton Trophy, but ultimately would come up short in key moments. I won 3 satellites for buy-ins, including getting first in a Club WPT satellite out of 2,154 players while streaming the entire thing, which is perhaps my biggest accomplishment in poker. In addition, I won 2 more satellites on WPT Global, where there were regularly 5-figure overlays and prize pools. Since I already have a seat through my brand ambassador deal with WPT, I gave away all the seats that I won. The first 2 seats I won, I gave to viewers Jeff and Julian. Jeff is from Arizona and actually went to our first out-of-state meetup game 5 years ago. You can see him pictured here. Julian came in from Norway, where live poker isn't even legal. Both Jeff and Julian have full-time jobs and don't get to play very often. Neither have ever played an event close to this big. The third seat I gave away to my brother Matt, who taught me how to play poker along with my dad, and he also helps me with the YouTube channel. Matt has never played a tournament with a buy-in over $200. He's getting completely thrown to the wolves and is understandably nervous going into day one. To be honest, I'm nervous going into day one as well. This event is one that'll go down in history books. The $15 million guarantee gets obliterated as there are 2,960 total entrants across 3 day one flights. The total prize pool is $29 million. It almost doubles the guarantee, and first place is over $4 million. You can feel the excitement in the air as it's clear everyone participating is part of poker history. We begin with 100,000 in chips, and the very first hand we're dealt pocket aces. If this isn't a sign that good things are to come, I don't know what is. My only real goal for day one is to survive, which is what we do. We bag a modest stack of 186,000, and I'm okay with it. Only 279 players out of 615 entrants in my flight advance. Unfortunately, my brother and the 2 other recipients of free buy-ins don't make it to day 2, but I give them each a percentage of my tournament run so they have a sweat and something to root for. After all the day ones are over, 1,185 players come back for day 2, and 370 will make the money. Among those who make it through are some of the biggest names in poker. A couple of those guys are at my starting table, which turns out to be one of the most intriguing in the entire field. Not only do we have Stephen Chidwick, who's arguably the best poker player on the planet, winning high roller after high roller against top tier competition, but we're also playing against Chris Moneymaker, who won the 2003 WSOP main event and is largely responsible for the poker boom in the early 2000s. I've run into Moneymaker quite a few times and I've always been friendly with him, but I've never had an opportunity to actually play against him. That is, until now. This is a pretty surreal moment for me after watching Moneymaker play on TV when I was 15 and battling my brother and his college friends around the kitchen table, dreaming of someday playing a $10,000 event, potentially for a lot of money. Now we're here, competing against the big boys. Aside from Chidwick and Moneymaker, there are a few other guys with 7 figures on Hendon Mob as well. This is no cupcake table. We're going to have to fight and scrap our way around if we want to survive the 5 90-minute levels of day 2 in order to have a chance at cashing. With 37 big blinds, we still have a little room to be patient, but not much. 40 minutes in, we pick up Ace-King offsuit in the big blind. Under the gun raises to 10,000. The hijack 3-bet shoves for 48,000 total. It's only about 10 big blinds. I 4-bet shove for 211,000 to isolate the hijack. I'm hoping the under the gun player doesn't have a monster. He folds, which puts my mind a lot more at ease. We're heads up and in great shape as the opponent tables Ace-Queen offsuit. The flop comes Jack 9-9 with 2 spades. Neither of us have a spade in our hand. Then the dagger comes. The turn is the Queen of Spades, giving the opponent a massive lead with top-top. The King is the only card that'll help us. The river is another 9. The hijack makes a boat to get a double up through us. Our stack decreases to 32 big blinds. It hurts to lose one like this after getting it in as such a big favorite, particularly when the opponent's money card comes on the turn like that. Still, we have plenty of chips and need to remain calm and focused. 16 minutes later, we're dealt pocket kings under the gun +1. These cowboys couldn't have come at a better time. I was feeling a little bit down about losing with ace king, but a lot less now. I'm in raised to 10,000. The small blind has a big stack, and he's worried that if he doesn't use it, he'll lose it. He calls. The big blind picks a bad time to be dealt a 3-bettable hand. He re-raises to 48,000. We've got 160,000 total in our stack. I consider flatting to keep the opponent's bluffs in if he has air. On second thought, this is already a significant pot. I don't want an ace to come out or have some other flop come out that'll scare the opponent away from getting the rest of his chips in there if we're currently ahead. We're not at a little girl's tea party, so this is no time to get cute or fancy. We 4-bet rip it for 32 big blinds. The small blind folds, but the big blind snap calls. He likely has ace king, aces, or pocket queens. The opponent reveals that he has pocket queens. It's about the best case scenario for us, but our tournament life is on the line. This is a different situation than when we lost to ace queen earlier. We absolutely have to win this, or our dreams of winning $4 million is dead. The flop comes 10-7-6 with 2 diamonds. It's relatively safe, although a queen came on the last turn to crush our hopes. This time, the turn is another face card, but it's a jack of spades. If we can avoid the last 2 queens in the deck, we'll get a huge double up that'll propel us to one of the biggest stacks at the table. The river is the ace of hearts. We did it. We win a huge pot to double up and finally have some breathing room while at the same table as a couple of Goliaths. Just as I'm beginning to feel more comfortable, we get notified that our table's been selected as the first one of the entire tournament to be on the WPT live stream. While it's pretty exhilarating to be playing a big event like this on the main stage against really talented players and to have it be broadcast to viewers all over the world, this is already a nerve-wracking day. I prefer not to have any extra pressure. Playing on stream is actually quite a bit different than if I'm recording a cash game session on my own. The one thing that I have going for me at least is that I have a lot of live stream experience, mostly for cash games though. That experience won't give me much edge over my opponents since Chidwick and Moneymaker have way more feature table experience in tournaments. My plan is to just play my normal game. I'm currently second in chips at the table with 60 big blinds and position on Moneymaker, who's first in chips. In 90 minutes, our stream time will be over and we'll go back to one of the outer tables. During the second hand of the stream, we pick up 8-6 suited in the low jack. It's perhaps 1 pip wider than what we should be opening with in this position, but I've got a solid image. I raised to 12,000. By the way, this is my new favorite hoodie at the moment. It's a black waffle knit design from Public Rec. I have a link in the description box below if you want to pick yourself up something from their website. Blake Whittington wakes up with pocket 6s in the cutoff. He's one of those guys I was telling you about who has over 7 figures on Hendon Mob. Blake has some hardware to go along with all that money. He's won a whopping 7 WSOP circuit rings. Blake calls. I mostly put him on a small to medium pocket pair type of hand, as well as some suited connectors and suited broadways. The flop comes 10-4 deuce with 2 hearts, giving us a flush draw with some backdoor straight possibilities. My hand definitely has value, but I don't want to get blown off of it. If I bet now and get called, and don't get there on the turn, I may have to check fold to a bet. If I bet now and get raised, I'm not going to love any of my options because for one thing, I could be up against a better flush draw. I check to get more information from my opponent and keep the pot manageable. One other benefit of checking is that if a heart comes, I'll have somewhat of a hidden flush that could allow me to get more value once we actually get there.
How do you approach these spots, Brent? One overcard, you want to get a bit of protection from the ace-kings, ace-queens of the world?
Yeah, it seems like a fine flop where you're feeling like your 6s are certainly the best hand. And I love what Bradley has done as well with this flush draw. He opted to, I believe, check call with this sort of hand rather than betting, perhaps getting, bloating a pot if you were to get raised on this sort of texture.
Looks like he has come for exactly that. Does check call a bet of 14,000. 67k going to the Queen of Clubs turn. Changes nothing. Pocket 6s of Blake still good. However, an overcard to the board. Those ace queens, king queens of the world now ahead of the 6s of Blake.
Another reason I love what Brad has done thus far in the hand. Let's assume this street may go check right here, and Bradley doesn't improve by the river. The door will be open for him to take this thing away.
We kept the pot small while we had potential but no showdown value. With the 3 of clubs on the river, our potential is all gone, just like Jamarcus Russell, and we still have no value. Also, just like Jamarcus Russell. After a check through on the turn, we got a lot of information from our opponent. Blake will never be checking back with 2 pair or better. He likely doesn't even have a queen, or he might have bet. He's going to have a pair of 10s or worse most of the time. Meanwhile, we can have hands like queen 10, ace queen, some king queen, queen jack hands in our range. There's no way 8 high is going to be good. It's one of the absolute worst hands that I'll ever check call a flop bet with. If we want to win this, we'll need to bluff at it to get hands like 10-9 suited or a pocket pair from 9s down to 5s to fold. That's what we're targeting. We don't need to bet too much to get folds out of those hands. In fact, if we bet somewhat on the smaller side, it'll look like we're trying to get value out of a low to medium strength hand, which might actually induce more folds from a good thinking player like Blake. I bet 27,000 into 67,000 to put our opponent in the blender.
Just textbook for Brad Owen. I love the way he's played this hand. Look at the horrible spot now Blake is in, and he has done nothing wrong in this pot. It's all about what Brad Owen has done right.
27 into 67, around 40%. Really value-ish sizing from Bradley, and it does get through. Bradley sneaking one through on the river up to over 400K. Textbook, I like that.
He's not just a vlogger, Henry. This guy can play ball.
He can indeed.
It feels really good to get a bluff through immediately on the stream in order to keep the confidence up and take some pressure off related to some ancillary objectives like keeping the chat entertained. Probably the best thing that comes from playing on stream is that usually with tournaments, I'm mostly showing the all-in situations when I'm capturing the footage myself on my phone, but with this footage, I'm able to show you the real battles in between those all-ins that are key to having success in MTTs. The very next hand we pick up ace-9 suited under the gun +2 and raise to 12,000. The small blind only has 27 big blinds, yet he decides to flat with pocket jacks. If it were me, I'd probably be jamming or 3-betting to a smaller amount. As it is, we're heads up in position. The flop comes queen 6-5, all hearts. Now jacks with no heart are really in a tough position. The opponent checks. I don't have a ton of faith in our ace high right now. We can put a lot of pressure on the small blind with just a small bet because he doesn't have that many chips left. I bet 11,000 just to see how he wants to proceed. This bet allows us to keep control of the pot and likely get to a river for cheap as well. The small blind isn't letting go of his high pocket pair just yet. He calls a small bet despite only having one turn card that he'll be happy seeing. The dealer puts out the 10 of hearts. Neither of us like this card. The small blind checks. I'm worried that he could have a flush. I check back. Perhaps I'll turn my hand into a bluff if the river is a blank and the opponent checks again. The river is the ace of clubs, giving us a lot more showdown value. The small blind checks. There's no need to turn our hand into a bluff of any sort. I check back. The small blind thinks his jacks may be good as he turns them over. I assure him that they're not. We get the win with our pair of aces. We're only 3 hands into the feature table and have already increased our stack by a healthy margin. Later we're on the button with ace-8 offsuit. We're happy to take down the blinds with this hand. I raise to 12,000. Our buddy Blake is in the big blind with pocket 3s. It's a reasonable hand to get involved with. He calls. We're heads up in position. The flop comes 7-6-3 with 2 spades, giving our opponent bottom set. He checks. A low board will connect well with the big blind's defending range. Ace high could be good. We've got some backdoor draws that we don't want to get blown off of if we bet and get check raised. I check back to see if we can hit a card that'll help us improve. The turn is the 5 of spades, giving us a flush draw and a straight draw. Our equity goes from 8% to 32%. The big blind fires 12,000 into 33,000. We're getting nearly 4-1 on a call when we only need about 2-1 to justify hanging in there. I happily call. We didn't make a flush against Blake in our first attempt with 8-6 of hearts. We don't make one now, but we drill the straight, which is even better in this case. What you don't see in the footage here is that I've chosen not to look at the river until the action's on me so that I don't give anything away. While waiting for Blake to act, I have no idea that I've made a straight. Even with this gross run out for bottom set, Blake feels comfortable betting for value. He makes it 27,000, likely planning to bet fold if we raise. This is when I look over to see that we've hit really the best river card that we could have hit. I call. Blake probably thinks that he's good with his set, but we actually get there on him this time. We show him the winner. He's understandably not happy that we hit runner. With this victory, we're at a new high point of the day and of the tournament. That'd be the last significant pot that we'd play on stream. There weren't too many interesting hands that I got into with Chidwick or Moneymaker. It was all pretty straightforward. I'm just glad to have survived one more level and to be off the stream so that I'll have a little less pressure. Over the next few levels, I do well to keep the stack moving in the right direction. I'm no longer at the table of death, and I'm feeling pretty good about the new table as the amount of remaining players is dwindling, and we're getting closer to the end of day 2. That is, until we pick up ace-queen suited on the button. It's the 4th 90-minute level of the day. Blinds are 5,000, 10,000. I raise to 20,000. The big blind either has a strong hand or doesn't believe that we're near the top of our range, he 3-bets to 80,000. The opponent has 416,000 total. If we look at what upswings winning poker tournaments course says to do when we're the button with around 50 big blinds effective and the big blind 3-bets you, it shows that we're supposed to be 4-bet jamming the majority of the time with ace-queen suited. The opponent in this case has a little closer to 40 big blinds, and we have him covered by almost 250,000, so I feel even better about ripping it in. I 4-bet jam, expecting the big blind to fold pretty often. Instead, he calls after only a few seconds of thinking about it. It turns out he's close to the top of his range with pocket queens. He has us in rough shape, though we still have a 34% chance of winning. The flop comes 8-4-3 rainbow. We don't even have a backdoor flush draw to make the big blind sweat a little. It's looking bleak. The turn is the jack of diamonds. We'll still be alive if the river isn't an ace, but almost everything that we've built up today will be erased and we'll be down to about 25 big blinds. Let's not concern ourselves with that just yet. Wow. Holy shit. Nice. I'm covered. We pull a Barry Greenstein to drill the ace on the river. The table is relatively quiet because it's a devastating way for the big blind to go out. Both of us did what we were supposed to do, and we just happened to get there at the end to scoop a massive pot. This is the first moment that I'm thinking we have a real shot to cash in this event, since this win gets our chip stack to over 1 million. We have over 10 times starting stack in WPT's biggest tournament of the year, with only about 500 players remaining and 370 cash. Min cash is 17,000. If we make the top 6, we'll be guaranteed a minimum of $1 million. I'm feeling great, but as players are getting knocked out at our table, they're being replaced by tougher and tougher opponents. The newest arrival is Adam Hendricks. He's currently #1 in the world according to Global Poker Index. I played with him during day 2 of Bellagio's 5-diamond event, and I like him, but right now, I'd rather not see him, and certainly don't want to tangle too much with him. The deck doesn't care. We pick up pocket queens in middle position. Adam raises to 20,000 from under the gun +1. I 3-bet to 50,000, thinking it'll look very strong. Adam isn't concerned. He 4-bets to 125,000 off of a stack of 580,000. If this were anyone else, I'd call, or maybe even fold, because very few people are capable of 4-betting light after raising from early position. I have a ton of chips, and I don't need to get involved with another one of the best players in the world in a big pot after he's shown a lot of strength. Honestly, I could just look for easier spots the rest of the night and mostly fold, then bag close to $1 million going into day 3 and being close to the money. It's not a bad strategy considering my current table has gotten really tough, and surely day 3's table should be easier. I could do all those things, but that's not what I'm going to do. I'm not letting Adam Hendricks push me around, and I'm not here to play for a min cash. I'm playing to win. Everything in green is what Adam could be 4-betting me with. Against average players in this field, I wouldn't expect people to find 4-bet bluffs that Adam certainly will be finding. Queens is ahead of everything except 12 total combinations of hands. I 5-bet jam for piles and don't get a snap call. I actually thought Adam had about 100,000 less in his stack, so I'm not happy when I realize exactly how much I jammed for. It's late in the day and tough to do math, but it doesn't look like the miscalculation is going to hurt me too badly because Adam definitely doesn't have aces or kings. We put Adam to the test to see if he wants to play for his tournament life, or will at least be a slight favorite. Adam literally says fuck it and makes the call with ace-king offsuit. We're about to play a pot of nearly 1.2 million in chips. If we win this, I'll eliminate the toughest player at the table to have one of the top stacks left in the entire tournament. If I lose, I'll be down to 430,000 in chips. I scramble to get the phone out and only start recording once it gets to the turn, but we're way ahead as the board is Jack 4 3 6. With only one card to come, all the hesitation about 5-bet jamming is gone. Adam only has 6 cards that can help him, otherwise he's out and will be poised for a deep run and a shot at a 7-figure score. The river shatters all those thoughts. Fuck. How much is it? My heart completely sinks. Not long after drilling the ace on the river to win a huge pot, our opponent drills a king on the river for an even larger one against us. My mind goes to some dark places thinking about how I could have reasonably flatted his early position raise with pocket queens, or just flatted the 4-bet and likely could have won on the flop or turn. Instead, I make a questionable 5-bet jam, get it in essentially the best case scenario after the opponent calls, and lose in the most devastating way. I'm down to 430,000, which is good for 43 big blinds right now, but after the upcoming break, it'll only be about 35 big blinds.
That was a crazy 4th level of the day. I hit the ace on the river to, win a pot of like 8 to 900,000, and then just feel like I got hit by a semi-truck with the Queens versus Adam Hendricks. Ace King, King on the river, so that was brutal. If I win that pot, I'm up to 1.6 or 1.7 million, but didn't go our way, so down to 430,000 now on the last break tonight, and there's 470 left, so we're about 100 away from the money, and blinds are going to be 6,000, 12,000 when we come back, so hopefully I can stay alive.
Level 15 begins, but very little happens. We chip up a tiny bit to end the day with 485,000. I'm glad to have survived day 2, but it's tough to look across the table and see Adam's racks on racks on racks. What's done is done though. All we can do is focus on what's ahead. We're still alive with 399 players left, and 370 will cash, so we'll be making the money early on day 3 if we can survive. We'll be giving it our absolute best. Stay tuned for the next few episodes because you won't want to miss the tournament run of a lifetime and quest for our first 6-figure score. It's the morning of day 3 for the WPT World Championship main event. 2,960 players entered. We're down to 399 going into the day, and 370 players make the money. First is over $4 million. I'm feeling great looking at the view from my room at Encore. Off in the distance, we see the Westgate, where Andrew and I held our first meetup games 5 years ago. I can't help but be nostalgic about those days when we were starting out and think about just how far we've come since then. The answer is about a mile. In 5 years, we've gone 1 mile. There's no place I'd rather be right now though. I'm with one of my best friends. We're both still alive in the biggest tournament of WPT's 20-year history, and we have an opportunity to make a lot of money.
Andrew, how are we feeling?
We got coffee. We got our eyes on this, this cash. Let's
Let's go.
My eyes aren't just on the cash. I want my name on this trophy. I have to be honest, when I first started thinking about this tournament having nearly 3,000 entries, I figured it'd be a long shot to even make the money, and winning, or even final tabling seemed unfathomable. There are just so many people to get through. It's a 6-day event, you really have to continuously run well in order to have any chance at all. With only 399 players left and about 32 big blinds, I'm beginning to think it's at least possible to make a deep run, go beyond a min cash of 17,400, and potentially get my first ever 6-figure score if I make the top 32. If we happen to run really well, we're guaranteed a 7-figure score if we make the final table. But first things first, we're 29 away from the money coming into the day with 485,000 in chips. Blinds are 10,000, 15,000. They're about 120 stacks shorter than ours. Today has a much different energy in the air as 370 players will finally see a return on their efforts for the past several strenuous days, while 29 of us will leave with absolutely nothing. I just hope that we have no difficult or stressful situations before the money bubble bursts. The poker gods have other plans for us. We pick up pocket kings in the cutoff. We're 40 minutes into the day and 10 players away from making the money. The hijack has a short stack. He's been playing tight, and he's been taking his time as he should be so that he can hopefully squeak into a 5-figure score rather than leave with only memories. The hijack should really be folding into the money, but he breaks his folding streak to open shove for 130,000. I don't mind getting it in for that amount here. What would be a disaster is if we rejam and somehow end up busting while there are so many shorter stacks than us at the moment. There's no way I'm ever folding though. I 3-bet jam for 540,000 to isolate the hijack. The button folds, the small blind folds, then the big blind. An accomplished player named Frank Finaro, who recently won a bracelet, has the second largest stack at the table, has us covered 2 times over, looks down at 1 card. A big smile comes across his face as he says that we have a sweat. Don't do it to me. Please let the other card be a blank. It feels like an eternity while I'm waiting for the opponent to look at the second card. Frank peels it back and snap calls our 3-bet shove for 36 big blinds. I already know it's aces. After playing 2 full days, outlasting 2,500 other players, and thinking that at least the min cash is all but locked up, I'm going to go out just 10 away from the money in the most prestigious WPT tournament of all time. The air immediately is sucked out of my lungs. I'm devastated as Frank turns over rockets. They look a little off though. Finally, it registers that Frank doesn't have aces like I thought he for sure had. He has 2 queens instead, and we're a massive favorite. The hijack somehow has pocket 4s, which I'm shocked to see because there's no way he should be open ripping it or even getting involved at all with that hand in this situation. If he doesn't get lucky to win, he basically just kissed $17,000 goodbye. We're in a 3-way all-in pot for over 1.2 million in chips. We really just don't want to lose the pocket queens. If we do, we're eliminated. If we don't, we'll have one of the larger stacks remaining in the field. The flop comes 10-7-3 with 2 hearts. It's relatively safe, but we don't have a heart in our hand, while the other 2 players both have one. Still, we're 2 cards away from more than doubling up and knocking out a player to get 1 step closer to the money. The turn is the deuce of clubs, alleviating any concerns of taking a soul-crushing backdoor beat. If either opponent is going to win, they're going to have to get extremely lucky by drilling a sat on the river. We only need to dodge 4 total cards. The dealer puts out the 10 of spades, giving us the victory at a crucial point in the event. We're now the 2nd largest stack at the table. Something catastrophic would have to happen for us to not at least get a $17,400 payday. You may remember I lost a 1.2 million chip pot with queens to Adam Hendricks' ace-king offsuit at the end of day 2 when he rivered a king. I'm glad to have recovered all the chips from that loss. We're at a new high point of the tournament. Suddenly, this money bubble isn't nearly as stressful as it was just a few minutes ago. We've got a huge stack of over 80 big blinds, and we're now only 2 away from cashing. The tournament clock pauses. We start playing hand for hand. We're 1 away from the money now. The room is filled with spectators rooting on their friends and family members who are right about to make their poker dreams become a reality. It's a big deal to make it this far and cash in a tough field with nearly every top tournament player in the world buying into the event. Cell phones and TV cameras are out to record when the bubble bursts. There are several all-ins, but the players at risk keep winning. It's a little frustrating having to wait for just 1 more player to get knocked out. Then all of a sudden, I find myself rooting for the player who's at risk to double up. It's announced that my friend and WPT colleague Tony Dunst has just gotten it in with top pair versus straight draw with 1 over.
Ace-6 versus King-5, 6-4-3. We'll see the turn. Queen of spades on the turn.
This is a brutal spot for top pair.
7 on the river, making a straight. That is going to eliminate Tony Dunst.
The entire room collectively reacts with disappointment after hearing about Tony getting knocked out. I've seen a lot of bubbles burst and never seen anything like this happen before. Usually it's the exact opposite reaction with people clapping, cheering, and celebrating, especially with the min cash being so big. But Tony's one of the absolute best ambassadors in the game and is pretty much universally loved. It's pretty cool to see that so many people were putting their own self-interest aside and were rooting for Tony to stick around. It's not quite over for him yet though.
Still 1 table with an on and a call. We lost 1 player so far.
We're down to 370 players and we're officially in the money with the 2nd all-in and call. If the player at risk loses, Tony and the other player who gets knocked out will split a min cash, so they'll get $8,700 each.
All right, players. Our last all-in and a call. Let's see the cards. Pocket aces versus pocket 10s. Pocket aces at risk.
If pocket aces get cracked, Tony will at least get most of his buy-in back, but pocket 10s will likely need to make a set.
10, 3 deuce.
Tony gets a 10 high flop that'll potentially allow him to win $8,700 in a hand that he's not even involved in after he's been eliminated from the tournament. This is a very rare set of circumstances.
Queen on the turn. 3 on the river. 10s full is going to eliminate 2 players on the bubble.
Tony Dunst somehow makes the money after all and avoids being the bubble boy. It's awesome to see him at least cash. I'm happy to cash as well. It's 1 more step that we can check off our list of things to accomplish as our table breaks. If we get switched to a table with my buddy and fellow content creator, Michael Longcar, he's another one of my favorite people in poker. We pick up pocket 10s an hour and a half after arriving to our new location. Blinds are 10,000, 20,000. I raised to 40,000 from under the gun +1. Not much has gone our way since winning with the kings, so our stack is back down under $1 million at the moment. The button calls our raise. Michael's in the big blind. He has the shortest stack at the table with only 10 big blinds. He 3-bet jams. He could be doing this with plenty of hands that we're flipping with, or we're maybe ahead of. It's unlikely that the button has us beat, or else he probably would have 3-bet himself. I want to isolate Michael. I 4-bet rip it for $645,000 effective. The button folds immediately. Michael shows that he has king-queen offsuit. We're a slight favorite. I'm going to switch to his footage since he gets his camera out first. He has a better view.
All right, Mr. Brad.
Good luck, Mike. The flop comes ace-jack-4 with 2 spades. We improve to being a 2-to-1 favorite, but Michael can hit any king, queen, 10, or runner spades to win. He could also hit an ace-jack run out to counterfeit our pair. The turn is the queen of spades, pretty much crushing our chances of winning. I have to hit one of the last 3 kings in the deck to knock out my buddy. You won't believe what the river is. It's a 10 of spades, giving us a set. That's not going to be nearly good enough, though.
Wow! Double with the Royal? Against Mr. Brad? Too easy. Too easy.
Andrew, nice hand, man.
We lose a flip with a rivered set versus a royal flush. It's a wild run out that reduces our stack to 700,000, but at least we keep my friend's hopes of winning $1 million or more intact. We're dealt ace-jack offsuit in the big blind during the same level. Under the gun now has the shortest stack at the table. He open rips it for 215,000. It's only about 11 big blinds. He can have all kinds of worse hands. I call. We're not up against a worse hand this time. We're up against pocket kings. Jesus, first we run into a royal flush, then we run into the second best starting hand. If we lose, we'll still have around 30 big blinds, but it's a little annoying to have these short stacks chip away at us. The flop comes queen 7-3 with 2 hearts. There's a little hope for us to hit a backdoor flush or backdoor straight. That's not going to be possible though, because the turn is the ace of diamonds, giving us top pair and a commanding lead.
Payout 302.
We get the lucky turn card to knock out our second victim of the day. It's nice to feel like the momentum is back on our side, as things were going the other direction for quite a while. People are getting knocked out nearly every minute at this point. We make it to the second break of the day with 1 million in chips. Only 251 players remain, and we're guaranteed a minimum payout at $19,900. The next level is pretty uneventful, except at the very end, I get switched to another new table, and this one is selected as the feature table. I already played on the feature table on day 2 with Chris Moneymaker and Steven Chidwick. It's certainly a lot more stressful to have thousands of people watching and commenting on your play almost in real time. Plus, you really don't want your opponents to have extra information about how you're playing this event, because you'll often be seated with them for several hours after the stream is over, and you may even see them on future days since there aren't that many players left. Only 189 players remain now. We're guaranteed a minimum payout of $21,750, and pay jumps will be increasing exponentially. Despite having almost 30 big blinds, we go into the stream last in chips with 870,000. Everyone at this new table has piles, and it's interesting for several other reasons as well. First, Drew O'Connell has won multiple bracelets, but he's not the only one with hardware. Richard Seymour is a Hall of Fame football player who has 3 Super Bowl rings with New England Patriots. I've actually played poker with Richard multiple times at Red Rock. He's solid. The most interesting thing to me about this table though is that my first friend that I made when I moved to Las Vegas is sitting on the other side of Richard from me. I've known Brian Gates since the first week I moved to the city over a decade ago. He's been on the vlog before, and more recently, when Andrew and I were interested in maybe opening up a brewery, Brian is the person who was going to be our brewmaster since he's extremely talented in that department and has won several awards for his brews. Just because I'm friends with Brian and have played with Richard before, doesn't mean I'm going to go easy on him. A few hands into the level, Brian raises to $65,000 from the button. That won't intimidate the 6'6" former Bulldog, weighing in at about 300 pounds.
180.
Richard 3-bets to 180,000. We look down for the first time at our cards and see ace-queen offsuit. After putting in the ante, we've got 28 big blinds that we started the hand with. Both of my opponents have shown at least some strength. Brian could be opening with quite a few hands from the button, so I'm not super concerned about him. I'm more concerned about Richard having a monster, like aces, kings, ace-king, or queens. I don't want to fold, and I don't really want to flat a 3-bet for 20% of my stack. We're getting closer and closer to massive payouts, so any mistake, particularly when you're covered and debating whether or not to go all in, could be extremely costly. When you're watching the stream and able to see the cards, it's easy to know what to do. When you're in the game, that's not the case at all. Each situation like this is extremely tense. I 4-bet shove anyway and hold my breath, just hoping that no one's at the top of their range. Brian folds immediately. Richard doesn't have anything that he wants to get it in with. He folds as well. We win a key hand that gets us back over the million mark. The very next hand, Brian has dealt more playable cards. He opens to 65,000 from the cutoff. We're in the small blind with pocket kings. This stream couldn't have started out much better. I wish it was against anyone else at the table, but I have to re-raise my friend 2 hands in a row. I make it 200,000. With Brian's stack, he's a bit handcuffed. If we were deeper, he could certainly call. Here, he understandably folds. I show the table so that they know that I'm not just playing like a maniac. I've actually been getting dealt good cards. This helps craft an image of me having it. Perhaps it'll induce more folds for me down the line when I don't have it. In this one, we're dealt ace-10 suited in the hijack. We're happy to get involved. I raise to 60,000. 2-time bracelet winner Drew makes the call with his enormous stack. He's not the only one. The small blind calls. Then to close the action, the big blind calls as well. We're going 4 ways to the flop. It comes ace-3 deuce with 2 hearts. We have the opponents absolutely dominated. We've got top pair and a flush draw. With 2 cards to come and 3 opponents, we have 97% equity. It's about as much of a lock as possible. Checks to us, Since we don't really have to worry about what comes out on future streets, with our hand having so many cards that can help us improve, I put in a sneaky check, figuring it may induce a bluff from one of our opponents. It'll disguise our flush if we do get there, and it'll keep the pot more manageable in the situations when we're up against a set, or perhaps a flop straight from the big blind. The button checks back, the turn is the 7 of clubs, the opponents are all drawing stone dead. It checks to us again. We have to at least attempt to build this pot and possibly get called by some non-believers, or even induce a bluff raise. I bet 125 into 270,000. No one would have checked to us twice with a hand that beats ace-10, so the only thing we really need to be worried about is Drew having pocket 7s or ace-7 of spades. He folds immediately though. The other two players fold relatively quickly as well. We're getting strong hands and continuously chipping up, just like you have to in order to make a deep run. Next it folds to us in the small blind with queen 6 of hearts. There's a pure limp situation. I call for 15,000 more. The big blind has Motown. His name is Nate. He's from Austin and plays the world's best card club. Apparently it's called the Lodge, and rumor has it that they have the Lodge Championship Series from April 26th to May 16th. It's supposed to be awesome. Nate checks, we're heads up out of position. The flop comes ace-6-3 with 2 clubs and a heart. We've got middle pair with a backdoor flush draw. Plus, ace-high boards are going to be better for us after voluntarily putting money into the pot pre-flop, and with the big blind just checking his option. We'll have a lot more aces in our range, plus our pair of 6s is likely to be best anyway. I bet 40,000. Nate is a sticky dude. He says 14% equity is just a number, and he makes the call. The turn is the 8 of hearts. We pick up a flush draw and don't want to get blown off our hand. I check to basically ensure that we'll get to see a river card. We can also induce some bluffs from worse hands. Nate has one of the worst hands that he'll ever have. He sees an opportunity to give us chips. He bets 85,000. It's tough for him to have much, especially when we're holding a 6, removing some strong combos from the opponent's range, so I'm not worried about Nate having a big enough hand to justify firing on the turn for value after I bet flop. I call hoping for a heart, but not thinking we necessarily need it. The river is the king of diamonds. We're left with the 4th pair. I check. Nate gives up his story that doesn't make a ton of sense, and he checks back. We turn over the winner. Our stack climbs to about double what we started the stream with, as the number of players in the field is quickly decreasing and we keep making pay jumps. Here Nate takes a couple of chips from his big tower and he raises to 60,000 with a suited ace. Adele makes a light call in middle position with about 17 big blinds. You're not really supposed to be calling much at that stack depth unless you have high pocket pairs as a trap or some suited Broadway cards. It's definitely a little suspect that he just flatted the early position raise. In the back of my mind I'm thinking that it's at least possible that he could have a monster. The cutoff also has less than 20 big blinds. He has a hand that he wants to play. He won't be calling though. He 3-bet jams as a squeeze with a solid holding. We're in the big blind, and we don't exactly get 2 napkins.
Oh. Brad is going to squeeze 2 8s right here, right now, and fling them into the muck.
I basically treat the 2 8s as napkins. It's a good starting hand, and actually 8s were tied for having the most amount of equity with King Jack offsuit at 30% when I was still in, and with the other 2 players both holding aces. The issue is that I'm likely flipping at best and could legitimately be in 4th place sometimes after the big stack opens from early position, 1 player calls, and someone 3-bet jams. I had 15,000 invested, which is just 1% of my stack. I don't need to call a jam or rejam myself when there's someone behind me who has me covered, who should be opening a narrow range from under the gun. Tournament poker is very much about picking spots and surviving. This is an easily avoidable one for us, despite seeing that in this exact instance, we folded the best hand. I prefer taking spots when decisions are clearer. The players behind us fold their marginal hands. Peter does a nice job of getting it through and chipping up. A bit later, we're dealt pocket 7s in the hijack. I raised to 60,000. The opponent in the big blind has about 30 BBs. He calls with King 5 offsuit. As your stack gets shorter, the value of having a high card goes up considerably, and you can justify making calls with worse and worse hands like this one containing only 1 high card. We're heads up in position. The flop comes ace queen 5 all diamonds. I'll have nearly all the possible king high flushes in my range aside from king 3 and king deuce of diamonds, and I'll have other strong hands like smaller flushes, all the sets, ace queen, and ace 5 suiteds. I'm pretty content with the flop, thinking that it's possible that my opponent flopped a flush, but he would have 3-bet or jammed pre-flop with hands like aces, queens, ace queen, and ace king. The opponent checks. Our hand doesn't really have that much value and will only get worse as more diamonds or more high cards come out. It's a flop that's pretty good for our range though. I put out a small bet of 50,000 to see if we can get the opponent to fold a hand with equity, and really just to see how he responds. I anticipate getting check raised by almost all the flushes in the big blind's range except maybe king high flushes. As the opponent is pondering about what to do, I don't get the sense that he's really thinking about raising me. He calls, then he checks his cards for a diamond. The vast majority of the time when people do this, it's because they only have one diamond in their hand at most. Usually if you have suited cards, you're able to remember what suit they are. With this look, I can rule out the opponent having all set and 2-pair combos as well, because it wouldn't be possible for him to be holding a diamond. He'd know that. The fact that he didn't check raise, again, basically rules out almost all flush combos. I pretty much put the opponent on an ace or queen with at most one diamond in his hand. It's also possible that we're up against King Jack, King 10, or Jack 10 with a diamond. The turn is the 10 of clubs. It's another Broadway card. The big blind checks. He'll never have a set of 10s either after calling pre-flop, although he could have combos of King Jack, Ace 10, and Queen 10 that would give him some strong hands. I'll have all those as well, plus a set of 10s sometimes. I keep the pressure on with a bet of 175,000. Now is when I'd expect to see a check raise from King High flushes. Once again, we don't get it. The big blind calls. I'm still putting him on 1-pair combos. It feels like Ace X, maybe King Queen, Queen Jack, or Jack 10 with a diamond. The river is the 9 of hearts. We've got 5th pair. The big blind checks one last time. I've got one of the worst hands that I'll have. I don't think that I'll be able to win at Showdown. The way I've played this so far, I can have flushes, straights, sets, and 2-pair. The way that the opponent has played this, he really won't have flushes, can't really have sets, and won't have top 2-pair. My general sense is that no matter what, the opponent won't be able to call a shove. If he has a hand like King 8 offsuit, we're way ahead, but if the opponent has a hand like Ace 6, or even a hand as good as Queen 10, I still don't think that he's going to want to call an overbet jam. I announce that I'm all in.
5 in your hand instead. It's Brad turning the 7s into a bluff and jamming.
Okay, Bradley.
All right.
I'm doing this purely as a bluff, but if I somehow have the best hand, then that's even better because there's no risk of us losing the pot. Aside from believing that I'm not up against a super strong range of hands, there are a few other ancillary factors that led me to thinking that a bluff at this point would have a higher probability of getting through. First, I've won every hand at Showdown, even showed strong hands when I didn't have to after making aggressive plays, like when I 3-bet my friend with the kings. Also, there was a hand previously when the same opponent ran into quad deuces after 3-betting pre-flop with ace-jack suited. He called a fairly large-sized river bet with ace high and lost a big chunk of his stack. Normally, you might think that you don't want to run a bluff through a guy who just showed that he was willing to call light, but Daniel said after, "Now at least you guys know that you shouldn't try and bluff me." And he did it in a way that seemed like he was slightly embarrassed that he called, and like he didn't want anyone to try and bluff him going forward so that he wouldn't potentially be embarrassed again. When you know what your opponent wants to do or doesn't want you to do, disappoint him. Going back to the 7s hand, I really don't think that he'd want to call light again and be wrong on stream for his tournament life. He probably has friends and family watching, plus his run could be over if he calls with an ace or some other 2-pair type of hand. This shove puts a ton of pressure on him. If he folds, he for sure stays alive, and he'll still have about 25 big blinds, which he can certainly run up. A lot of this is moot because we see that we actually have the best hand, but this is one of the most interesting hands that I play in the whole tournament because I make this shove after considering a multitude of components that all came together. First, there was the live read of seeing Daniel check his cards while making the call on the flop. Also, this is a board with mostly high cards. I didn't get check raised on the flop, so we ruled out a ton of strong hands based on how it was played pre-flop and on the flop. Then there's my image, which is perhaps as solid as it gets. Finally, there's game flow and pressures of being on stream and not wanting to look silly by making an incorrect call twice for lots of chips, and in this instance, for your tournament life. Daniel folds, and I'm disappointed to find out that he had King 5 because I think he'd fold much better hands than that, and much better hands than ours. We win a sizable pot either way, and we're not done. Not long after, we've got Ace-Queen offsuit under the gun. I raised to 60,000. Adele is again in that awkward stack range with about 17 big blinds. He calls with Queen 10 suited from the cutoff. I think that he's mad because I told him that I like Apple computers, and he's obviously a Dell guy. We're heads up out of position. The flop comes Queen 8 deuce with 2 clubs and a heart. It's a dream flop given what both of us have. I bet 50,000 to induce shoves from all kinds of worse holdings. Adele snap rips it in. We get what we wanted and call immediately, figuring that we could be up against some type of flush draw. I'm happy to see that we're up against a worse queen. The opponent only has 3 outs and backdoor draws. The turn is the 6 of spades. We're 1 card away from winning a pot over $1 million. The river is the 4 of diamonds, securing the victory for us. Adele becomes our 3rd victim of the day. He at least gets a nice payout of $24,800. We all tell him goodbye. He says, no, this is just a hello from the other side. I ask him how many calls he thinks he's made this tournament. He says that he must have called 1,000 times. Meanwhile, one of the most interesting levels that we've played in 3 days is wrapping up. In 90 minutes, we went from being the smallest stack at the table with 870,000 to being third in chips with almost 2.4 million. The two guys ahead of me have some of the largest stacks in the whole tournament as well. I couldn't be happier with how the day is going. We go back to the outer table to play, where I get the stack up over the 3 million mark for the first time. Unfortunately, my buddy Brian would bust after getting it in pre-flop with pocket kings versus ace-king offsuit and losing. Also, I bluff off a good chunk a few hands before the day ends, but I finish with over 2 million in chips. I make my first ever day 4, only 128 players out of the 2,960 total entrants remain. We're guaranteed a minimum of $29,450, and we're only just beginning. We want the cup and the top prize of $4 million. Stay tuned for the next vlog. After 3 grueling days of playing WPT's most prestigious event in its 20-year history against the best players in the world, in high-pressure situations for high stakes, we come into day 4 in the middle of the pack. The tournament area is noticeably quieter as only 128 players out of the original 2,960 entrants remain. But the pay jumps are getting bigger, much bigger. We're guaranteed a minimum payout of $29,450. If we can make it through half the field today, we'll get our biggest ever tournament score. If we're able to make it to the top 32, we'll get our first ever 6-figure score. If we get top 6, we'll make over $1 million, and first gets over $4 million, and their name on the Mike Sexton Champions Cup, which is what I want more than anything right now. This is my first ever day 4, and it's in the $10,400 buy-in. I've had a few chances at big money in the past, but none in which a 7-figure payout was so possible. It's good to see my friend Michael Longcar, who hit a royal flush on me versus my set on day 3, is still in it as well.
Let's go, man.
Get that bag.
Good luck, Brad.
Let's go.
We've got 2,085,000 in chips. It's over 20 times starting stack, and blinds are at 25,000, 50,000. We've got about 40 big blinds, and I'm coming in as focused as I could possibly be. The structure of this tournament has been so good that I've mainly been able to play similar to my normal cash game strategy because I've been fairly deep the majority of the way. My strategy was always to play the best of my ability while also prioritizing survival and making it through each level and each day so that I have a shot at getting some big payouts. You can't win the tournament on days 1, 2, or 3. You can't win it on day 4 either, but how we do today can really set us up to win $1 million or more on day 5. We're right on the cusp of some big payouts now. We won't have the luxury of being able to play it safe anymore though. We pick up ace-king suited in the cutoff 45 minutes into the level. Gene Gaspard, whose nickname is Prince, raises to 100,000. He's a complete maniac. He's been in poker for a long time with 3 million in tournament earnings and a bracelet. Gene plays a way wider range than what's recommended, and he's going to get punished for that. I 3-bet to 300,000. Perhaps Gene thinks my re-raise could be on the lighter side because he 4-bet jams. He's got us covered. I've already seen this particular opponent do some suspect things today. We're at the very top of our range, and there's no way in hell we're folding right now. I call thinking that we could be ahead, tied or flipping. Instead, Gene is also at the top of his range with pocket kings. We get it in as a 2-to-1 dog in a pot for almost 40 buy-ins worth of chips. Sometimes you run into these cooler type situations and it's just your time to die. The flop comes ace 9-7 rainbow. There's no sweat for us as we immediately flop top. It's not our time to die yet. The turn's the 8 of spades. Gene has only 1 out, and the poker gods don't have enough against us to give it to him. The river is the 9 of hearts, with the snap of the last card hitting the felt and giving us the victory. I couldn't be more pumped up to start the day off well.
Double up. 1 point.
This win gets our stack close to the 4 million mark. We're at the new high point of the tournament with almost 80 big blinds. I can go back to playing more of a cash game style without having to constantly worry that we're 1 hand away from potentially getting knocked out. All I can think of as we make it to the first break is that maybe this is my time. Maybe I'll finally get a signature win, or at least a 6-figure payout. I'm excited and have so many positive thoughts running through my head as a Poker News reporter pulls me aside and asks me to do an interview on the break, which I'm more than happy to do.
To get a big double up early on, I feel like I'm free rolling the rest of the day.
I don't know if you heard, but on our Poker News podcast, they did some predictions about who would do well in this tournament, and they predicted that you wouldn't do well in this tournament.
You can see the look on my face that I'm completely caught off guard by this remark. I played 9 total buy-ins of over $3,000 in 2022, and I've cashed in 6 of them, including 4 WPT main events and a high roller. I've gone on a complete tear since signing with WPT in April and added a few $100,000 to my Hendon Mob in the process. I'm in the zone right now thinking about what I need to do to have success the rest of the way, so the last thing I want to hear about is how some people, for whatever reason, didn't think I'd do well.
Well, I wasn't aware of that, but I mean, fuck those guys. I'm just gonna go ahead and say it. I don't know who it was, but yeah, I'm gonna try and prove them wrong every day. I'm not particularly proud of this moment, but for me, it's really important to stay in a proper mindset when the amount of pressure is high and I'm playing for a massive amount of cash. This conversation totally took me out of the space that I wanted to be in mentally, and I felt obligated to speak my mind. The break ends, we're in level 22, there are less than 100 players left, and I've got some additional people that I want to shut up hard. We pick up pocket sevens in the big blind. James Carroll raises to 125,000 from the cutoff. He's another one of these superstar players that we're going to have to battle with. I defend the big blind for 65,000 more. Nothing has gone our way since the big double up 2 hours ago, so the stack is down to 2,450,000. We're heads up out of position against a WPT main event winner with over 5 million in live earnings. The flop comes 8-7-3 all spades. We've got middle set on a highly coordinated board. I check to James. I know that he knows that this flop will smash my big blind defend range, given that it contains middling and low cards that are all one suit, yet he bets 100,000 anyway. I have an important decision to make. I can put in the check raise now, but I wouldn't be fist pumped getting it in if I got jammed on, and I wouldn't want to get called, then have a spade come out, and have to check fold. If the opponent is bluffing with complete air, we don't necessarily want to chase him off either. I call to keep the pot more manageable and conceal our strength. The turn is the 10 of clubs, so some straights get there, and pocket tens now has us beat. I check once more. James comes in with a much larger bet sizing of 525,000. I'm surprised because this is another card that connects with the board that's theoretically good for our big blind defend range, even after calling a flop bet, and James isn't afraid. If we call, we'll have 1.7 million behind. It'll be about a pot-sized bet. This isn't a great situation for the cutoff to bluff, so there's at least a decent chance that we're behind at the moment. I don't want to jam and risk getting snap called by a flush. I flat, hoping to see one of the 10 cards that'll help us improve. The river is the best one of those 10. It's the 7 of hearts giving us quads and a huge pot. It's hard to contain my excitement as I check. James doesn't look to be concerned about the board pairing. He does an inventory check, cuts out chips, and bets 900,000 that'll eventually be coming to us. We only have 800,000 on top of that. I put in the check raise shove, which would be suicidal if we didn't have at least the ace high flush. James is in shock as he knows he's run into a monster, but it isn't that much more for him to call. He goes deep into the tank. It seems likely that he flopped a flush. After a long deliberation, he makes the fold. This is when we get the chance to pull the camera out. I let James know that he made a great laydown. He confirms that he indeed flopped a flush and then does an amazing job to get away from it on the river. We do well to avoid getting our stack in bad, correctly assess the situation that the opponent likely wasn't bluffing, display some patience, and we get rewarded at the end. Yeah, all the sevens. Check call flop, check call turn, check hands river. Things weren't going that well for almost the entire second level. To get this win at a key moment is a giant boost to get some momentum back on our side. If we check raised on the flop or turn and the run out was slightly different, we could have easily been knocked out of the tournament. Instead, we've got over 4 million in front of us with a very real possibility of winning life-changing money. On the second break, I head to the WPT VIP lounge that used to be packed with Club WPT members. Now it's completely empty. There are only 80 players left in the field, and we've made multiple pay jumps. With 10 tables left, we're guaranteed a minimum of $46,650. We're 2 pay jumps and 16 bust outs away from my largest tournament cash. Almost an hour into the third level, we pick up pocket tens under the gun. With blinds at 50,000, 75,000, I raise to 150,000. Pat Lyons is a new arrival at the table. If you don't know who Pat Lyons is, he's more than happy to tell you and everyone within earshot that he's the world-famous Pat Lyons. Here's his Twitter profile. To his credit, he's probably the absolute most famous person that I've ever met, with less than 1,941 Twitter followers. Perhaps regionally famous Pat Lyons is a more appropriate title, with that region being just in his head. But he has won a bracelet event and also a WPT main event. He's another wild opponent, and he 3-bets to 550,000 from middle position. This is the second time he's done this in the last few minutes. I'm beginning to suspect that he doesn't always have it. Pat's stack is about 40 big blinds. We've got him covered. I'm tempted to rip it since there are only 4 better pocket pairs than ours. If we don't hit a set, we won't like most flops. Despite us possibly having the best hand if we're up against ace-king, ace-queen, or more bluff-type combos, I flat to preserve our stack in case we're behind and see a flop. The dealer puts out 9-3 deuce with 2 clubs.
There are no overcards out there, and it's unlikely that we're up against a set of 9s. This is one of the best flops that we could have gotten without improving. I checked to see how Pat wants to play this. The boisterous opponent puts out a big bet of 800,000, leaving himself with only 1,750,000 behind. This is a brutal spot for us. If we call, we may not want to see any clubs on the turn. Despite having the 10 of clubs, we certainly won't want to see any ace, king, queen, or jack either. That's a lot of cards that we'd have to fade. A call would put the pot at 2.9 million, and Pat would have barely more than half a pot-sized bet remaining in his stack. It seems like we have to either fold an overpair on the flop to an eccentric dude for a bet of 2/3 pot, or get it in right now for 2.5 million effective. I'm handcuffed, and I hate both options. Ultimately, I rip it for 2,550,000 effective. We've got the opponent covered if he calls, so even if we lose, we'll have 11 big blinds. Pat snap calls and couldn't be happier to show pocket kings. The locally, sometimes recognized opponent has me absolutely crushed. To make things worse, he's got the king of clubs, so we don't have the backdoor flush to fall back on. This is just another cooler situation. We've had 2 go our way so far. It was just a matter of time before one went the other way. The turn is the jack of clubs. We pick up the flush draw, but it makes no difference since Pat has a better one. We're down to 2 possible outs and a pot for over 6 million in chips. We'll either be one of the chip leaders with 70 remaining, or we'll be left with scraps. Sometimes, it's just your tournament.
Wow! Holy fucking ass, damn it, man. Fucking damn it. Fuck.
I haven't covered.
I'm not sure there's much we could have done differently in that spot. We both had overpairs, so it pretty much played itself, but we get as lucky as possible to put a world-famous beat on the opponent for a pot worth over $600,000 in buy-in money to knock out our first victim of the day. We're running as hot as possible in every important hand. I'm not a particularly religious or spiritual person, but it's hard not to feel like I'm getting some help from my dad in a few of these spots. From time to time throughout the tournament, I'll think about him and wish that he could have stuck around a little longer to see runs like these. Getting lucky isn't exactly how I want to win, but I've been on the losing end of plenty of these in important spots in other tournaments. Now that I'm on the right side, I'm going to do my best to make the most of it. Meanwhile, Pat gets sent home.
Payout 100.
Matt Savage. Final table boarding. World famous, took too many bad beats on this table. Damn it.
We've got about 7 million in chips after the win, and we continue to chip up from there. We keep winning small pots to get our stack to new high points. Right now, we're guaranteed over 53,000, so we head into the break, and I'm still in shock about the all-in hand.
That was the luckiest I've ever been in any pot ever. You just get it in a 3-bet pot with 10s versus pocket kings, you know, on a 9-high board, and for, you know, just 5 million chips in the middle or more or so. So that was just insane, and I've gotten it in bad twice. Won both of those, ace king diamonds versus pocket kings, and then 10s versus pocket kings again. And you know, 67 left, trying to just focus, trying to not get too ahead of myself. But we got 8 million, and we're going on the feature table now.
Let's go, guys. Let's go, buddy.
Let's go, brother.
Come on, buddy. Lock in, kid. Come on.
Crush him on that.
Thanks, man.
Play well.
This will be the 3rd time in as many days that we're playing on the feature table. In some ways, I'm getting more comfortable doing it in a tournament setting, but there's really no way for me to be totally at ease given the situation. The one thing that does make me feel better is seeing guys like Joe Ingram and Michael Longcar around. Joey isn't in the tournament, but Michael is, and I'm rooting hard for him, as there aren't many players left. Just the bottom right section is reserved for the main event, while other tournaments are taking place in the rest of the ballroom. We come into the feature table towards the top of the leaderboard with over 80 big blinds. I feel like I'm playing my best poker, and I'm obviously running incredibly well at the same time. That's the thing with tournaments though, if you want to outlast 2,900 other players and make it to the top 2% of the field like we have so far, everything has to come together, and you have to get lucky at different points along the way. We've already got a day 5 chip stack, but we're still on the clock, so we might as well get back to work. Michael Longcar gets switched to our table as the field gets reduced to 8 tables and just 62 players. We've made another pay jump to $61,350. It beats my previous best payout of $58,500 that I won at the end of October. Here, Gene, aka Prince, raises to $250,000. He's the person that we doubled up through to start the day with Ace-King versus Kings. We look down at Ace-9 offsuit in the small blind. We can mix in calling or 3-betting. There's no real reason to increase variance by 3-betting against one of the other big stacks at the table when pay jumps are happening so rapidly and are exponentially increasing.
I call to see a flop against someone who you may remember I described as a maniac earlier. The big blind has a decent hand given the circumstances. He calls. We're going 3 ways to the flop out of position. The dealer puts out 9-9-6 with 2 diamonds and a club. We've got trips, but it could be tough for us to win a big pot since no one else connected in a significant way. I check to induce a bluff. The big blind checks as well. Gene will have tons of 9s in his range when he raises from the button. That fact won't help him here as he runs into trips. It doesn't stop him. He fires for 300,000. We've got another big decision to make. If I thought I was up against a tighter opponent, I may check raise to deny equity in case we're up against some kind of draw, or even get value against some other strong hands like worse trips or overpairs. But I played with Gene enough today to know that he's capable of blasting away with complete air, and I don't want to scare him off if that's what he has here. I call, even with another player behind, to completely disguise the strength of our hand. It'll probably look like we've got a draw, a 6 of some sort, or a small to medium sized pocket pair. I don't really want to go 3 ways to the turn out of position, so I'm happy to see that the big blind folds. It's down to heads up. The turn is the 6 of clubs, giving us a full house. Generally, when you're not the pre-flop raiser, but you check call to bet on the flop, and the bottom card pairs on the turn, it's often going to be better for you. You can lead small in those instances. With 3/4 of the 9s accounted for, I doubt Gene has much. It'll be really difficult to extract more money from him. If I check, there's a high probability that Gene will check back, even with the hand as strong as 6 is full. I need to give Gene some rope to make it look like I'm trying to get to the river cheaply with a draw or a hand like pocket 7s.
1.4 million in the middle.
Ooh, a little small lead here. I think this is pretty cool.
Oh,
by
wow.
Brad. Gene snap raises. Oh, Brad.
Okay, he's playing the man, chat. He's playing the man.
Okay. Brad just so excited.
Brad with a little block ski. Gene with the snap raise to 1.2 million. Action back on Brad.
Unfortunately for Brad, I think when he does call, which he's never raising, but I do think that once he does call, Gene is not going to try to bluff the river since he's very likely up against a full house now.
Jesse Sylvia is doing the commentary. He does a great job assessing the situation. It's really tough for me to call a raise for 1.2 million on this board and not have a full house or quads. There's very little chance that Gene has a 9 or a 6. At this point, I figured Gene will be giving up and checking back all hands worse than ours anyway. We need to get creative with a small lead again. Gene made it 1.2 million on the turn. I'm going to make it even less than that on the river to potentially try and induce another raise because that's our only shot at winning more chips in this hand.
See if Bradley comes to block again.
That would be cool.
That would really...
Oh my God, he's doing it.
We bet 800,000 into almost 4 million. Gene is getting about 6 to 1 on the call. The trap has been set for him to rip it in as a bluff, but he folds. We still make about the maximum. We're now the largest stack at the table as well as we cross the 10 million mark. We've got more than 100 times starting stack and are in complete control with a good feel of the table.
Up to over 100 big blinds.
Wow.
Brad Owen, 647,000 subscribers on his YouTube channel. Got a funny feeling some hands from this 10K are going to make the vlog, mate.
We get to tangle with Gene again as he raises to 250,000 from under the gun. I told you previously that he raises light. We just happened to get unlucky and then lucky again when we ran into the top of his range earlier on in the day. We pick up king-queen suited and can mix in raising or calling against most opponents. In this situation, against a looser than average player, I prefer to 3-bet. I make it 700,000 to go. I want to isolate Gene while we're in position. My 3-bet will get tons of respect from the rest of the table because we're doing it from under the gun +1. Players are going to have to fold really strong hands behind me, including most pocket pairs and plenty of ace highs that are actually ahead of us.
Definitely think people are picking up on what Gene's been laying down. Gene not folding the king 10.
This is a very, very loose 3-bet call with the hand that Gene should have folded twice by now. We're heads up in position. The flop comes ace, jack, deuce, all diamonds. We've got the nuts with a royal flush redraw. Gene checks. All the top 4 diamonds are accounted for, making it once again tough to extract value. It's at least a good problem to have.
Would love to see a very small bet here. Or a check. Something like... Check would be really nice, but something like 350, 400 would be great. 300. Brad puts out 4. Nice.
Gene does a diamond check. I'm thinking there's almost no way that he has one since this is a 3-bet pot and we already know where all the high diamonds are. yet Gene calls anyway while he's drawing almost stone dead. There's a small chance that he might be after me. The turn is the 6 of spades, it's a complete blank. Gene checks, he had something good enough to call a re-raise with pre-flop, and then call a small bet with on the flop. Perhaps he'll be willing to call another small bet, or potentially will put in an adventurous check raise. I bet 750,000. What's interesting is that this is one of the very few flushes that I'll have in my range after 3-betting pre-flop. I can basically just have King-Queen suited, King-10 and King-9 suited, and none of those combos are even supposed to be pure 3-bets. Gene is tired of getting strung along, he folds. If I knew what he had, I still probably would have bet around the same amount to induce a bluff, but a check back would have been super cool to see how Gene would have played the river. Still another fairly large pot that goes our way. Maybe playing on stream isn't so bad after all.
Brad Owen, since joining the feature table, came to the feature with 8 million, up to 11.6.
He's got to be hovering in the top 5, top 10, right?
He's out there cruising, that's for sure.
What makes this experience even cooler for me is that out of nowhere, Nick Petrangelo sends me a text letting me know that he's following along with how I'm doing on the feature table. I've watched Nick play tons of big televised events for piles of money. I haven't talked to him in a few months since we released the course on Upswing, so the fact that he's watching on his own accord and is reaching out is something that's special for me. We're not able to have our phones on us when we're playing, but if we want, we can periodically walk away from the table to look at our phones. It's awesome to have one of the absolute best tournament players in the world in your corner, telling you that you're doing really good things. I'm playing with a lot of confidence right now. All the pieces seem to be falling into place for a once-in-a-lifetime run. I'm glad to have a friend with me at the table too, to keep things a little more light, as we're right about to go on dinner break.
I've got a buddy who will have a steak dinner ready for us at Ruth's Chris Steakhouse at Harrah's if you want to hop in the lift with me and go.
Down, yeah.
Yeah?
Is it 90-minute dinner?
His nickname is Prince.
Always trying to butter up
Jesse
the first time you left,
is
huh, Michael?
well
That's
aware
right,
of
that's right.
the Vegas
Came for dinner,
locals.
We can't quite go to dinner yet. We pick up ace-queen offsuit in the hijack and raise to 200,000. The big blind picks up 2 suited cards. He defends. We're heads up in position, while I've got my close friend on the rail sweating the action. The flop comes Jack 5-3 with 2 diamonds. The opponent checks. We won't connect too well on this flop very often and have equity that we'd like to realize. I check back. The turn is the 6 of spades, giving the big blind a sneaky 2-pair. You'll often hear me say that people rarely check again with a strong hand once it's been checked through on the previous street. The opponent reinforces that with a bet of 350,000. Since we played the flop passively, it seems premature to let go here. The big blind could be taking a stab with all kinds of worse hands, including semi-bluffs like 9-7 and 8-7 combos, flush draws, or King-4 or Queen-4 suited type hands. I call. The river is another 3, giving the opponent a very hidden full house. The big blind is an extremely good player. He knows that I won't have much after checking back the flop and just calling the turn bet. He fires again, this time for 1.6 million into a pot of 1.2 million. It seemed like a really fishy line because a lot of possible draws missed, and I played my hand relatively passively, so I think ace high could be good sometimes, but there's no need for me to make this call. I'm going to take my time though to think this through, and for other reasons. My main objective by tanking in this spot is to see if I can pick up any reads on my opponent in case we play other big hands together in the future. I'll be able to see what Dan has here once the half-hour delay ends, then if we play another big pot together down the line, I'll look to see if he acts similarly or different to this hand when he has a boat. Normally I wouldn't spend lots of time pondering a decision like this, but the level has actually ended, and everyone's left to go on break aside from us and Benny Glaser, who was recently added to our table. Benny is a 4-time bracelet winner and doesn't mind skipping part of his dinner to see the outcome of this hand in order to potentially gain any additional information from it. It's not worth me trying to be a hero in this moment with 56 left, and we're now guaranteed $71,400 while getting even closer to gigantic cashes.
Yes,
And
nice
the
fold, Brad.
cards go into the mark as the chips go back
Ace
into
high good there or no?
Brad Owen's stack.
Good, ace high is good?
Come on, he's going to see in 30 minutes.
He's going to see in 30 minutes. The boys are going on a 90-minute dinner break, and a well-deserved one after 3.5 days of play.
I grab a delicious steak dinner with Michael Longcar. He doesn't pay, by the way. Even though we both secured the biggest tournament scores of our lives, we dine and dash. We'd like to keep improving on our personal best, but Michael's going to need a little more help than us with only 25 big blinds. We come back from dinner break, and because there are so few tables left, WPT decides for the first time to keep the feature table the same for back-to-back levels. Previously, they'd switch out which table was featured every 90 minutes. Today, we're on stream for 3 hours in the midst of 9 total hours of playing. It's a marathon, and the table's getting tougher and tougher. In this one, Benny, who just won the biggest pot of the tournament by doubling up with the rivered full house versus Dan's rivered flush, raises from under the gun +2 to 250,000. Gene snap calls with queen deuce suited from the small blind. It's an interesting play. We've got pocket eights. It's a hand I'm fine closing the action and going multi-way with, so that if we do make a set, we'll have multiple opponents who can potentially pay us off. I call for 125,000 more. We're going 3 ways to the flop. The dealer puts out 977. It's pretty decent for us. It checks to Benny, who's now the chip leader, not just at the table, but for the whole tournament. He checks back. When he does this, he'll mostly have hands like the one that he has here. I expect to be up against a lot of ace highs, which have some showdown value. I'll certainly have hands containing 9s and 7s, and Gene could have anything, including a card that allows him to advance to the nearest railroad that, if unowned, he can buy from the bank. The turn is another 9. If Gene had a boat, I'd anticipate him betting rather than risking it getting checked through again. He checks, so going back to the principle that people don't often check twice with monsters after checks through on the previous street, I'm no longer concerned about him having a strong hand. 8s are very likely to be good. I bet 300,000 partly for value, partly for protection. We don't want to see any overcard come out, but we could potentially get called by some ace highs that are drawing slim. Benny's getting 4-1, but he only has 15% equity. He's in an interesting spot because he could be drawing dead. It's not only me that he has to worry about, it's Gene as well. Still, he's not too concerned. He calls with only 6 outs. Gene folds immediately. I put Benny on pretty much the exact hand that he has. The river is the ace of hearts. I know it's a terrible card. It's really the worst one possible. I check. Benny's hand is pretty face up, and I can still be trapping with some full houses or quads. He checks back to make sure that he doesn't get blown off of his hand. One more goes his way as the commentators are still talking about how much Benny's recent double up is worth in actual dollars. We're really getting down to it now, so the amounts that our tournament chips are worth is staggering.
How much was that pot worth in ICM value?
Oh, God. I mean, we're talking about like 2/3 of a final table stack. I wouldn't be surprised if it's between 1 and 2 million.
The stakes are high. We're 1 away from another pay jump. There are 49 of us left when Michael picks up ace-4 suited with 16 big blinds on the button. If this were a different point in the tournament, I'd jam ace-4 suited in a heartbeat. Being 1 elimination away from a $12,500 pay jump from $71,400 to $83,900, there are a couple things that Michael can do. The first is that he can just fold sort of a medium strength hand like this one until one more player gets knocked out. That's not a terrible option. You probably have to wait less than 1 orbit to make an additional 5 figures before being at risk. Second is he can min raise. It still gives him an opportunity to win the pot pre-flop. If he gets 3-bet jammed on, he could potentially just fold if he wanted to. Third is he could bet almost every single chip that he has except 1. When it's folded to you pre-flop, you only get a few seconds to act, then you have to use a time extension if you want to continue considering your options. We see Michael use a time extension here. We were given 4 of them at the beginning of the day, and they get replenished every level. Now if you get 3-bet pre-flop, you're allowed to tank about as long as you want without using a time extension, as long as no one calls the clock on you. You're also allowed to tank as long as you want post-flop, so you'll see a lot of top-level pros bet almost everything except 1 chip. Then if they get jammed on for a big blind more, they might stall for a bit to give someone an opportunity at a different table to bust before them when they're on the cusp of a pay jump. These kind of tactics can be a little annoying for others, but it's totally within the rules to do this, and it's all part of playing tournaments in the most profitable way possible. Michael is primarily a tournament pro, so I figured that he may use up all of his time extensions and still min raise or go almost all in aside from 1 chip. Perhaps he's not aware that we're 1 away from a pay jump, or maybe he's just a gangster and doesn't care. He announces that he's all in. Gene has a somewhat difficult decision with ace-8 offsuit in the small blind. He finds the call though and is in great shape. I'm pulling extremely hard for my friend and dine and dash partner in crime. Not only is he a talented poker player, he's one of the nicest guys in the game, and I have a ton of respect for him. The flop comes Queen 10-9, all clubs. It's about as bad as it gets for Michael. You can see both me and Michael in this shot, not having too much hope since Michael has just 2 outs. The turn gives Michael a pair, but it's the wrong suit. Gene makes a flush to officially knock out my last friend in the field. You can just see how much class Michael has as he gets eliminated. That's the perfect example of a graceful exit. I was pulling so hard for him. I've known Michael for years. I got to play with him on day 1, day 3, and day 4 of this event. It was great having someone to root for and joke with at the table. I'm sad to see him go.
Handshakes all round and a warm embrace between Lonka and Brad Owen. Love to see the sportsmanship shown around the table, and obviously 2 good friends. Michael just wishing Brad the best of luck as he finds himself in the biggest spot of his tournament career.
As unfortunate as it is to watch a friend get knocked out, we're down to only 6 tables and need to remain alert because there's a world-class player present who will take advantage of any slip-up, and he has us covered. That player raises his $250,000 from Under the Gun +1. We're dealt ace-jack offsuit in the small blind. You may think that this is a 3-bet situation, but because Benny opened from early position rather than late position, and because we're really deep, it's a call. Floating a pot against someone as good as Benny while out of position with ICM implications makes me want to 3-bet even less. I call, the big blind picks up a playable hand, he calls as well. We're going 3 ways to the flop against the chip leader and the best player left in the field. The flop comes ace-6-3 with 2 spades, we've got top pair and a big lead. Checks to Benny, the player with the most bracelets in the UK, bets $225,000 with a hand that doesn't have any showdown value, but has potential to pick up decent draws and equity on the turn. I call, though I don't want to be facing too much more pressure on future streets. The big blind folds, it's down to heads up. The turn is another 3, that's one of the better cards for us. It reduces the likelihood that we're up against ace-3 or pocket 3s. I check, Benny gives up trying to bluff us, he checks back so I can rule out him having any better aces, or really anything that has us beat. The river is the 5 of hearts, we almost for sure have the best hand. I want to attempt to get some value out of hands like middling pocket pairs or an ace-8 suited type of hand. I bet $800,000. This could look like I'm attempting to steal the pot with a missed flush draw. Benny doesn't fold right away with 9 high, which can only mean that he's contemplating whether or not to fire a raise as a bluff to push us off our top pair.
Benny thinking of something very nefarious.
While we wait, I'm already planning on calling a raise because our opponent's line wouldn't make much sense unless Benny somehow has pocket 5s or another full house that he checks back turn with, like one remaining combination of aces or one remaining combination of ace-3 suited. Ultimately, Benny folds. That'd be the last interesting hand that we play on stream. We started out hot, then didn't really win any other big pots, but we still finished with about $1 million more than we started the stream with. We play one more 90-minute level off stream as they bring in a new table to feature. We get down to 40 players and make the final pay jump of the night. We're guaranteed $99,600. It's $400 away from the 6-figure score that I can't imagine us not getting when we still have a ton of chips, and I'm more thinking about getting a 7-figure score. I'm physically and mentally exhausted as the day ends with only 37 players coming back. That was my first ever day 4. I couldn't have pictured it going any better. Now we're pushing the envelope by making my first ever day 5 with a very real possibility of winning one of the biggest tournaments of the year and over $4 million. We bagged $9,750,000. 2022 is already the best year of my life as far as poker goes. This is an unbelievable way to cap it off. I try to get some sleep, but it's tough to wind down mentally with all the adrenaline and all the thoughts about how day 5 could go, while we're going into it 8th in chips. If we just finish the day in the same place we started at, we'll win over $500,000. Day 5 plays down to the final 6, where each prize is $1 million or more. It's not every day that you wake up with about a 1 in 6 chance of becoming a millionaire, but that's the case for us now. I get a ton of support from friends and family who've been following and getting updates through social media and the grapevine. I didn't sell any pieces, so I have all of myself except for a few small swaps that I made, and you may remember that between day 1 and day 2, I told the players who won a seat from my contest giveaways that I'd give them each 1% so that they could continue to have something to root for. I didn't really anticipate it amounting to anything, but I'm happy that it turned into some actual money for them. There's nothing I'd love more than to give these guys $40,000 each. The morning of day 5, I make my way to the strip, enjoying every moment as I reflect on all the hours that I've studied, all the books that I've read, the years that I put into poker before the vlog started, the time I went broke, the days I drove back from casinos, swearing, and on the verge of tears, wondering why I dedicated so much of my life to this game, and if all that time and effort would ever be worth it. Some people think that I'm new to tournaments, but that's not really true. I played my first 10K buy-in when I was just 22 years old. I just graduated college that summer, and I didn't have a job lined up. I played a $100 satellite at a local casino to get into the WSOP main event. The $100 that I put up for the satellite was the most that I'd ever spent on a tournament at that time. It was a multiple day satellite. I felt bad because the final day was played on Father's Day of 2010, and I had to skip a family barbecue. I made sure that if I was going to skip that, I'd make it worth it. Out of hundreds of entrants, I won one of 3 seats that were given away as the top prizes. We finished around midnight, and I called my dad to let him know the news at the first opportunity that I had. He was so excited and told me that it was the best Father's Day present that I could have given him. With a ticket punched to my first ever WSOP experience, I had visions of winning it all. I did great on day 1, and I had a blast, I finished with a top 50 stack for my flight and thought that I was going to final table. I had no idea what I didn't know. I busted in a boat over boat hand for piles of chips on day 2 and was devastated. I literally had nightmares about the hand months later even. Looking back, if I had run deep in that event and cashed for 6 figures or more, it probably would have been the worst thing for me. I wasn't as good as I thought, and I wouldn't have earned any real poker success at that time. It's 12 years later now, and I put enough blood, sweat, and tears into the game to feel like I've earned the right to be here. Regardless of what happens today, this has already been the run of a lifetime, and I'll always remember making my first ever day 5. We make our way to the table. We've got almost 10 million in chips with blinds at 100,000, 200,000. We're only 5 knockouts away from a proper 6-figure score. 2 players bust out, then we pick up pocket kings in the cutoff. I raised to 400,000. Drew O'Connell was on our left. We played with Drew on day 3, and he just won a massive pot to double up with a full house over a flush. He 3-bets to $1 million. It's likely that he's trying to bully us now that he has a big stack, and we're opening from late position ourselves. He could be doing this with all kinds of garbage. It's too risky to flat and let Drew see a flop in position against us without charging him more, while we have the second best hand in poker. I 4-bet to $3 million off of a stack of $8.2 million. It doesn't take too long before Drew 5-bet shoves. I figured that he may just call sometimes with aces, and there's no way that we're getting away from this hand. I let the table know I'm not folding, but I'm going to take a second. I want people to know that I have a big hand, but that I'm going to take at least a minute or two to see if some of the other players bust. The whole table is talented pros with multiple players who've won bracelets. Frank Finaro is one of them, and he nods and says, "Okay, no problem, we got it." A minute goes by, there aren't any bust outs. Another minute goes by, still no bust outs. I absolutely hate doing this type of thing, but for a chance at a $20,000 pay jump, it's very important to take your time. The thought creeps into my head that I may actually be up against aces. Maybe I should just fold to make sure that I get one of my lifelong goals of a 6-figure score. That's ridiculous though. I'd never be able to live with myself if I folded and not give myself a chance at winning one of the biggest pots of the tournament. I'd rather play my best and live with whatever the outcome is. I get tired of waiting, and I'm not going to do it anymore. After 2.5 minutes, there aren't any bust outs. I call and see that we're up against Ace-King offsuit. We're 70% favorite to have enough chips to put us in 3rd place with 35 left. With the win, we could pretty easily cruise into a $500,000 payday, and there's no reason to think that we wouldn't be able to final table for $1 million or more. The flop comes Ace-3 deuce with 2 diamonds. It's a devastating blow, particularly because we started the hand in the top half of the field. Even just in this shot, you see multiple other players, all with smaller stacks, that I wish I was able to outlast. The turn is the 8 of diamonds. I check our cards and confirm that we have the king of diamonds. We went from having almost no outs and no equity to picking up a flush draw, keeping our hopes alive of staying in the tournament. It's almost a 17 million chip pot. We heard Jesse Sylvia say the night before that a pot for about the same amount could be worth between $1 million and $2 million in ICM value. With fewer players in the field, that value would only go up. In terms of actual dollars, this pot is worth 15 to 20 times more than any cash game pot that I've ever played in my life. We need to hit either a diamond or the last king in the deck. My heart is racing, I can barely breathe. I'm not ready for the run to be over, but the river is another 3. It's only 20 minutes into day 5, and it's all over for us. I could have not shown up today and made at least an extra 80,000. Instead, we're finally the ones that get bad beat with kings.
Good game. Oh my God.
It's never fun to get knocked out. It's not at least I made a pay jump after coming into the day 8th in chips. It's pretty soul crushing, but I was on the other side of the ace-king versus king's hand for my tournament life to start day 4. I could have lost at that point, or I could have lost the majority of my stack and the 10s versus king's hand as well. All in all, I'm very fortunate to have a run this deep and to have gotten this experience playing against so many world-class players and heroes of mine along the way. We come up $400 short of my first ever 6-figure score. I tipped $2,000 to the dealers and staff who were terrific all series. I let the few people who had pieces of me know that they're going to be receiving some money from me shortly. Then I cash out for a $97,600 score to conclude what I hope is the first of many WPT events held at Wynn in Las Vegas. I'm proud to have been a part of the event and to have had a real chance at winning such a historical tournament. I just have a little more unfinished business and something to work towards. It may take a while, but I look forward to sharing the next time that I have my biggest tournament score ever and eventually making a vlog of my first ever major tournament title. That's it for this one, guys, and that's it for the entire tournament coverage, the entire WPT main event run. It was so much fun. I had a blast kind of reliving it, making these vlogs. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, I'd appreciate it if you hit the like and subscribe buttons. I was working kind of just day and night. I put everything into it to get these videos out in a timely manner, from the day 1 and day 2 vlog a week ago to now with this 3rd episode of it. And it was just such a cool experience. And I've been playing poker since I was 15, and I turned 35 next month. So it was really, you know, the best run that I've had in 20 years. And I don't know when the next run like that'll be, but I did the best job that I could to take you through it and show you exactly what it takes to have a deep run in a $10,000 buy-in event like this. You will have to get really lucky. You will have to battle through some tough spots emotionally and mentally. You know, you'll have to probably 2-out someone at some point and play against top tier opponents like the Benny Glacers and Steven Chidwicks and Adam Hendrickses of the world. Everything really has to go right, and that's why, you know, these runs don't happen that often. So just thanks so much for watching the last few episodes. Kind of rough there at the end to bust out the way I did on day 5. Obviously had to get lucky on day 4 and in multiple other spots throughout the tournament, but to outlast 2,925 players, to come up $600 short of the first ever 6-figure score, and really just 29 players short of getting my first ever 7-figure score, that was pretty rough, because you just never know when something like this is going to happen again. But anyway, it was just awesome. WPT and Win did such a great job throughout the entire series, but specifically with this event, it was a $15 million guarantee, and they ended up getting $29 million in the prize pool. So I can't wait for next year, and be on the lookout for next vlog, because it's the last poker session that I play of 2022, and I play against basically all my poker heroes. I'm playing high stakes with Phil Ivey, Doyle Brunson, and Phil Hellmuth. So that is one more really, really cool episode that I'm excited to share with you. All right, guys, good luck at the tables. Thanks so much for watching and supporting the journey. So I really appreciate it, and good luck at the tables.